I've got amazing panelists today. So first of all, I'm going to call Surinder from .go. Really great to have you. Next one is Jonathan from Cinch. Great to have you, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you.
Next one is Trevor from Cineverse. And last but not the least, Sri from Somos. Excellent. Gentlemen, have a seat. So I've got a lot of wisdom and experience on this panel, and I've got only 30 minutes. So I'm going to try to plant some questions in, and hopefully everybody enjoys and learns something from them. So my first question to Surinder for you. So given your role leading the development of RCS and RBM solutions, what are the key challenges you have encountered in ensuring that these technologies are adopted by carriers and enterprise worldwide?
Yeah. So RCS is a new channel which has a lot of similarities with SMS and OTT channels, but also differences and complexities of its own. And our overarching philosophy has been to take advantage of the similarities and hide the complexities by building a platform that offers a portal and APIs that are as close to possible to the existing interfaces that these carriers and aggregators and ISVs and brands are used to, but hides all the complexities and kind of builds underlying APIs with Google, Jibe, other maps, and leveraging AI and LLMs to get the best possible experiences. For example, carriers have more control with RBM in terms of who to allow, which brands to allow to launch, and what kind of messages are allowed, as well as newer billing models. But they need the tools, the processes, the capabilities to make that possible. So .go has built a map that carriers can use to monetize, and our maps are powering several carriers, including the largest commercial deployment in India that is processing more than 1 billion messages on a monthly basis. For aggregators, there's even bigger challenge because they have to deal with multiple maps, multiple platforms to provide full market coverage. So we have the .go RBM hub that allows a one-stop platform where they can do the onboarding, launch in any number of carriers, and using APIs send traffic globally and kind of hides all the functionality. I'll talk about one example of a challenge that a brand used to have. Like one of the requirements is that you need to have support opt-out, like a stop keyword. And we saw a lot of brands will take time to build their own implementation of that. So we incorporate that in the platform so that they can only, they can automatically turn it on, they can customize the keywords to stop and start. And so that's kind of the example of how you want to make it as close to possible to existing interfaces and start going and hide all the complexities.
Right, so you have a nice wrapper around orchestration between all the different Googles and the Apples.
Correct. Correct. And now with that kind of CAPL coming in, we've seen on the beta version, RBM working with Apple, and of course, it's kind of very similar, but again, the UI and the look and feel are quite different, and that's going to lead to a new challenge where when you're designing content to be sent out, a rich card carousel, earlier you had to optimize for Google Messages and Samsung Messages and few other clients which are quite similar. Apple has a new, unique, and interesting way of rendering carousels. So you need to optimize for that, and those are the kind of things that you need to build on a platform so that each brand does not have to build on their own.
Right. You talked about RCS and the traditional SMS. So a little question on that. How do you foresee the evolution of RCS impacting traditional SMS and other OTT messaging platforms?
Right, it's a great question. So again, with Apple's adoption of RCS, we've seen kind of the acceleration in the adoption and reach of RCS. And as that happens, we'll see more and more. Really, I think one fear, a lot of carriers have the fear that RBM will cannibalize A2P SMS. But the way we look at it is it's really an upgrade to A2P SMS. Eventually, it will be replaced by that because it's a better way. Plus, it will be an upsell with greater revenues. And from a carrier's perspective, it's a way to stop the bleeding and be on a stronger competitive footing with the OTT apps. From an OTT apps point of view, like WhatsApp and Viber, they will continue to innovate and evolve, and also kind of putting the RCS ecosystem on their toes to keep up the pace. And we've already seen that in the GSMA committees. We are seeing kind of acceleration in terms of new features being added for RCS and RBM. And overall, I think it will just lead to a healthier ecosystem with more innovation and rich business messaging between all of these various channels.
Excellent. I do have another question, but I'll wait for it. I'm going to come back to you.
Okay.
My next question is more on Jonathan, on the enterprise messaging solutions. So how do you balance the need of advanced features with the demand of reliability and simplicity in enterprise messaging solutions?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I've been a product owner, product manager for about 20 years. I did UX work at Ericsson, interfacing with mobile phones and that actual part of how a user works with a device. So not unfamiliar to the role and scope, but I'm going to use examples of 10DLC. So everyone here knows that shortcode is a mature product that sits out here. But with 10DLC, and Cinch was one of the first DCAs that worked with the carriers, starting out with reviewing the API descriptions and with the campaign registry and understanding what we need to do, and Aegis with vetting partners, WMC, on how to understand, interpret brands. We still were starting with a very nascent product, something where we were targeted, and their goal was to solve a problem with unregistered messaging, the wild west of P2P. And there were folks that in that field and space still did things the right way. And then you have bad actors that are always going to find the most creative ways to break in. Very challenging to do that. But there was a definition that we had to first understand who the brands, get those folks registered, the brands and their campaigns that are out there. And to do this, like everything else you do when you're building a product, you have to look at the users that are using it. And that sounds simple, but it is not. So we have existing tools that Cinch and all these other aggregators have, which are our internal portals. So these are your inside sales folks. These are folks from not just the United States, but rest of the world. Most of these aggregators in this space are global. And you've got to start ramping up those tools to be able to do campaign and brand registration. You've got to work with the APIs and, of course, all the different components that are tied in to collect the information for brands and campaigns. You've got 19 different campaign types. That's just the description of the campaign that you're filing with 10DLC. You've got about 13 fields that compose the brand and who you're doing business with that have to be scored and come back and give you an evaluation of who you're doing business with, the actual brand that they're touching that. And then initially we had CSPs and DCAs. But all of that changed when we looked at the real ecosystem being a larger component with CMPs and partners that are selling to other partners. And if you use Cinch just as our own internal example, we went through a buying spree, bought billions of dollars, spent billions of dollars on companies, and these acquisitions had all other UCaaS providers and resellers behind that we then had to incorporate and build and grow with. So you've got APIs, you have customers who are going to come up to your dashboard and want to use your portal to do interface and submit their campaigns that way. And then you have your large scale folks that are resellers that come in and they're experienced and they need an efficient partner to be able to submit these campaigns and then have them reviewed. The end result, if you're doing things right, is thousands of campaigns a day. And that's where we are, and most of the folks that are leaders in this space are dealing with. And then all of those other aspects mean that we have deployed, and we're on our second iteration of AI for campaign reviews, where we are able to do, and this is the goal set, not to use the machines to review and approve campaigns, but to make sure they're complete. And work with that feedback on what we need to do on both our APIs and documentation that clearly display what a call to action is, to walk you through examples for stop and help. Those different attributes that design a campaign or tell you what you're supposed to do, that's your business case for that. So each one of these are projects. And if you look at that at scale, you're talking 100,000 campaigns, plus over hundreds of thousands of campaigns with just Cinch alone. that are individual projects where customers waiting to use that application. Now, you do have big vendors that are out there that can send high volumes of traffic on just a handful of campaigns. Your food delivery services and ride sharing and stuff. Then you have proxy use cases and political messaging. All these are where you have similar use cases of P2P, which was called snowshoeing. Now it's called campaign attributes with all these number pools, sub-ID number pools, functions that enable this to work within the carrier-defined changes that they're making. So the other piece here is the carriers are now changing their rules. They're recognizing that there's pieces and elements that need to be changed, some fields that become mandatory, and in a lot of cases, they have to be able to complement some of these use cases where you do need more numbers to accommodate, say, MMS throughput. So we're building and changing the rules as we go. So if that isn't complex to do at scale, I don't know what is. So if you can solve for 10DLC, I think it sets you up with a lot of the rules that we're going to need for future components like RCS. And I think, and I'll wrap it up. There, if you look at the United States' challenges, and in Canada here, you're in a good place because you can start with learning from our mistakes and also picking and choosing what things worked and what didn't, asking good questions. There's a whole lot of areas that are a lot behind the curtain of really understanding where the P2P, and there is good P2P traffic that's out there from all these other folks that operate in that space legitimately, but you still have to police it. And we're going to talk about compliance, but that's the other aspect, that these are just business cases, that in the end you have to look at the data, and to Eddie's point, if you're not finding that bad actor traffic that's out there and blocking it, the campaigns are just a story. Yep. It's just a template for what you are supposed to be doing to protect those good brands that are onboarding.
Yeah, some bad apples can really destroy the whole industry.
It just takes one for the whole cart to be ruined.
Exactly. You talked about the U.S. market insights. I wanted to ask, what are the unique challenges and opportunities you see in North America compared to the rest of the world?
Okay, so we're not special. But what is nice is that when you look at North America, at least U.S. and Canada, we have very similar rules for what we call CTIA and regulatory bodies. Expectations for campaigns to be compliant, having consent and opt-in, all those attributes, super important that we do the right things. It starts really at onboarding. And when you do this, whether in a large company, you're going to be doing the same practices for all those folks that come on. You have to know your customer. You have to know your upstream provider, so what the carriers expect. And those elements don't change much, whether it's a Bell or Telus or Rogers, or it's an AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile. They're protecting their subscribers. So our goal is to put down all the information that we need in concise documentation for our customers so they know and have good instruction on how to do this. But then we have to watch the pipes. So there is those challenges you heard with Proofpoint, and you may hear from Adaptive as well, but these are the bad actors are getting better and better at finding the gaps that are in there. And certainly you've experienced this as a consumer, but the ways that they're using to find out information about you. There's been, besides the breaches on carrier networks with mobile information, don't help. There's also the social engineering scams and all these different ways where if you don't have robust measures, multi-factor authentication, securing your customers' accounts, that they can easily get in to your network and take control, not of a 10DLC, but short codes and all these other trusted mechanisms, because they want into your customers' data. That's what they want. They want to be able to spoof the banks and the large brands that are out there. And we all have our due diligence to protect our ecosystem. If we aren't all looking to do this the same way and working together more intimately with our carriers, exposing the challenges that are out there and finding ways where we can all adapt to it, then we're going to find that this business has a shorter time life than it should.
Excellent, excellent. So Trevor, on to you.
Can I just say ditto?
No, that is not allowed. All right, Trevor, question for you is, like, as a senior director with 10 DLC and messaging service strategy, what are the primary challenges you faced in implementing 10 DLC standards, and how have you addressed them? I know it's a lot of
Now you see why I said ditto. So first, I want to thank Caitlin and TJ for inviting us here to have us on this panel. I live in Texas now, and it's 40 degrees Celsius today. So, so much nicer here. No, what I would say is similar to what Jonathan was saying, is that, you know, as a DCA in the industry, we serve at the pleasure of the carriers in understanding the type of traffic that they want into their network, whether it's in Canada or the US. So as Jonathan mentioned, one of the first things we do is we start off with understanding the type of traffic that's coming through. And, you know, we do that through what we receive from the campaign registry, trying to find trends using some of our AI and ML. And then when that's flagged, having manual review. And then once that's approved, you know, we still have, you know, anti-spam scanning to make sure that the traffic that's registered and being sent is what's actually being delivered down to the customer. I will say the two biggest things that we're starting to see when it comes to campaign and brand registration is, one, the easiness of a website being able to spin up. You can go online and, you know, pay $99 to get a really good-looking website that's going to fool about 99% of the people. But because of, you know, what some of the things we have in place, we can start seeing the trends. There's some certain fingerprints in all of these websites that you can identify and say, okay, this looks fishy. And then the second thing is, once the campaigns are approved for good brands and campaigns that want to send the traffic, is actually looking at the types of messages that are going through. And the thing that we've seen lately is the use of multiple alphabets in messaging it, such as, you know, English-based and then acrylic, which looks very similar to the English letters, but if you're not paying attention, a human can look at it and say, oh, that's a L, when in fact it's an acrylic letter. And so, you know, those are some of the things that we're focusing on now, educating our customers and, you know, developing KPIs to help them understand what they're doing and how they can perform better, while also working with the carriers to continue to evolve and share their message of what they want to receive.
Right, like, you know, with AI, there's a lot of good use cases, but I'm pretty sure the bad actors are not behind.
Yeah.
So how do you keep up with the technology advancement and making sure the bad actors, even using AI, still are outside of the gate?
Yeah, I think what you have to do is use the same tools that the bad actors are using. Put yourself in the mindset of, if I'm a bad actor, how am I going to use this to my advantage? And then getting one step ahead of that, and then coming to events like this and talking to other industry experts and learning from them and what they're seeing and kind of collaborating together.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Next one, Sri, I know you've been waiting right on the end of the queue. So Sri, as a CTO at Somos, you oversee advanced number intelligence services, which is like identity and fraud management. In the light of increasing sophistication of fraud tactics, how is Somos leveraging machine learning and AI and, you know, behavior biometrics to enhance real-time fraud detection? So it's much more advanced than.
Yeah.
So how do you do and how do you prevent it at a large scale?
That's a great question. Let me start from the very basics, right? So Somos is a number intelligence provider, and we started off being a numbering administrator. So we issue the telephone numbers for all of North America. So we're the North American Numbering Plan Administrator. We're also the toll-free number administrator, again, for all of North America. And we also manage a database called Reassigned Numbers Database. So this is the list of all disconnected numbers from the carriers that are given to us, and that's purely for TCPA compliance purposes. So these are all authoritative data sets that come into us that we are actually managing. And we manage the life cycle of these telephone numbers, which are actually like identifiers, right? So they are essential as sending numbers for messages and calls and for people actually to receive communications. So they're really, really important. So this is the kind of basic aspect of what we do. And then we also aggregate the global numbering information. So we have information about every country, like 200 countries, number ranges that we actually add into this. And we create the next layer up, which is combinatorial data sets. So this is to say, okay, now we have data sets that say these numbers should never originate a call, because if you take the North American numbering plan, you can never have an area code that can start with a 0 or 1. These are like obvious rules that have been built into the overall numbering plan. And if there's a naive scamster that says that actually uses bogus numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on, we can actually block it. We can actually flag those things. And then there are more sophisticated ones who actually use other means, and we can actually create these data sets that allow for us to know which are potentially fraudulent communications, either texts or calls. And the interesting thing is, since these are purely based on numbers and not the modality, so we're very horizontal. So if you look at OTT messaging, RCS, WhatsApp, and so on, they're relying on telephone numbers. So the same intelligence can also be applied to them, even for OTT messaging. So they actually also could rely on these things to help prevent fraud in their offerings also. So this is where the combinatorial thing comes in, where we can actually help figure out how we can eliminate fraud at the origination or the termination. The next layer up is what you appropriately call the behavioral biometrics, which is really interesting, which is where all the machine learning and so on comes in. And this, we gather data from a lot of different data points, and we have our own proprietary algorithms that enable us to provide a reputation for numbers. So if somebody says, I want this vanity number, we can actually say, you know what, this is the reputation potentially for that number, so buyer beware. So they know what they have to do when they actually want to use that number, either for a campaign and so on. So these are all the things that we built up. So authoritative data sets, bringing all the number information in from all over the world, and then creating these combinatorial data sets that enable us to look at fraud, and then the behavioral biometrics that allow us to provide the reputation.
Right. Now with IoT, I know you're involved with the IoT as well, and there's numbering, I hear, is going to be there too. So how do you scale? Like suddenly you'll have so much more data coming from these IoT devices, and some of those IoT devices could be bad actors as well, sending some messages.
Yeah, so that's a great point. So one of the ways there's intersection between IoT and this is, so if you take cellular IoT devices, cellular connected IoT devices, they probably have a SIM card. And a SIM card means it has an ICC ID, which defines a SIM card. There's a missed in, which means there's a phone number in it. And you know that those IoT devices are not going to originate a phone call or send a text message or whatever. So now those need to go into a special data set for us that says, hey, if you see a number that is actually from those missed-ins, then they should be flagged as fraud, right? So they're potentially fraudulent. So those are all data sets that we actually put together. And the other interesting thing is, since we're tracking the life cycle of these numbers, right? Because numbers can go into service, go out of service, get disconnected, get spared, and so on. The life cycle provides us intelligence to actually identify fraud, security, and so on. So that's the kind of data analytic intelligence layer that we can provide on top of this.
Excellent, excellent. Coming back to yourself, I want to talk about some of the interoperability challenges, right? So with your extensive experience in software product development, what are the most significant hurdles that you would share with this group in ensuring interoperability between diverse messaging technologies like SMS, OTT, now RCS, A2P? How do you make them in one simplicity, just like your product that you have on .go?
Great point. Again, when it comes to P2P messaging, there are different challenges. I'm going to focus more on A2P, where from a brand's perspective, they have a certain target audience and they want to get their message across to their entire base. And I'll start off with RCS. I mean, with SMS, typically the reach is universal, so they can reach anybody. With WhatsApp, it's a bit lower, but in markets where they're where they are actually active. It's much higher. RCS today is a lower reach. In the US, it's more like 10%, although it's going to leapfrog to 70-80% with Apple's adoption. And it's very important that if I'm doing a campaign, I want to reach out to my entire audience. So in a way, interoperability boils down to essentially doing a fallback to an alternate channel if I cannot reach the user on the primary channel. Now, it's kind of seems simple, but there are a lot of complexities. One is the capability or the feature set is different between SMS and RCS and the OTT apps, while RCC and OTT apps have a lot of richness, but again, even there are differences in the way what these rich elements are. Secondly, there is a difference in terms of the billing model. SMS is largely per message base or per message segment based on the length of the message. With both OTT and RCS, you have session-based pricing as well. But even there are differences between RCS and WhatsApp. WhatsApp has like standard, BIC or business initiated conversation pricing and user initiated conversation, whereas with RCS, you could start off with basic message, A2P single message, which is like a rich message, as well as then A2P conversation and P2A conversation. So how do we do all of that mapping? And there's another element as well where today, most of the brands are having their communication go over SMS and they want to quickly upgrade and take advantage of RCS. So in fact, instead of looking at the other side, instead of fallback, it's like an upgrade. So that's again an interoperability. So from a platform perspective, those are some of the capabilities that we're adding. So in addition to the standard RCS APIs for sending messages, we also support SMPP and SMS APIs. So you could use the standard SMS APIs and then say, okay, I want to automatically first try to send it over RCS, and the platform takes care of it. And then in that case, your first kind of attempt is RCS, and the fallback is SMS, which could be sent from, let's say, our platform, or it can go back to the aggregator or iSuite so that they can send through their own channel. And we plan to kind of extend it to having the same with WhatsApp and other OTT as well. Some of these capabilities are today present in our parent company, Gupshups, who's more of an omni-channel provider. But we plan to kind of add that to .go as well. As I said, more in terms of you can use a WhatsApp API to also send over RCS. So that's basically how we look to address these challenges.
So it's your wrapper that also does.
Right. Yeah, and again, I think maybe again just to add a little bit to some of the questions about 10 DLC and the US market. I think US was one market which was kind of a laggard in terms of the RCS reach, but it's soon going to become the most important market for two reasons. I mean, Apple has such a large market share, and you'll get very high RCS adoption very soon. Secondly, OTT apps do not have such a strong presence in US. So for both of these reasons, I think it's a market ripe for RCS and RBM to become the most important channel.
Excellent, excellent. I know we are close to the end of the time, but I'm going to ask from the audience if anybody had any questions for our panelists. Right. If not, thank you so much for the pleasure of hosting you here. I appreciate you being on the stage. And I learned quite a bit, especially on the IoT side, the 10 DLCs and the complexity on all the messaging. So really appreciate it.
Thank you.